Good Wednesday morning. Today, the 5th of February. Already.
February.
It's a February, March.
You're a month behind.
Taylor Stephenson, meteorologist, here to keep me in line. Thank you,
You're welcome.
Taylor. So wait, this is March.
This is March.
Yeah, meteorological spring.
It is.
We talked about that. All right, you have found us here on the weather desk, and we've got a big day here. It has already been a pretty crazy stretch of weather for parts of the country. A major storm system rolling through.
I mean, you were just talking about meteorological spring. That's when we usually see our most significant severe weather. Started on March 1st, which is Saturday. And we've already seen tornado damage, some confirmed tornadoes out in the Great Plains in the south already. Yeah, we've got some amazing video to show you from some other parts of the country. It's all a part of the same system that is marching eastward, and it's going to impact us right here in the Mid-Atlantic. I should introduce myself. I'm meteorologist Craig Moeller. I mentioned meteorologist Taylor Stephenson. We work at 13 News Now. We broadcast from Norfolk, Virginia, right at the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay, serving Hampton Roads and a good chunk of the Mid-Atlantic. So we're going to talk more about the headlines. Let's start with a look at these headlines here from the weather desk. And you can see, again, this major storm system impacting the United States, working eastward. We're going to get into the specific threats to the Mid-Atlantic region, what's coming up. Today, there's already a tornado watch just outside of the 13 News Now viewing area, and that's carving out a good section of North Carolina. I'll show you where the new watch is and what we can expect later on. And then Ginger Z did a package that we're going to share with you and kind of a deeper dive into the job cuts at NOAA and the National Weather Service. She kind of breaks down what areas were hit and what areas were not touched and how all of this works still to support our weather community and what we're able to share with you, the end users, just the folks that need to know about the weather. So we'll break all of this down. You may have heard about it, and there's a lot to talk about. We're going to start off, though, with a look at this major storm system. And I'm just going to mention right out of the gates before we get to the broader picture, here's what is in line for Hampton Roads. And we do have, of course, viewers watching us right now on the 13 News Now Plus app from all around the country and all around the world, but a lot of our viewership is right here in Hampton Roads. So if you are watching from Southeast Virginia or Northeast North Carolina, we're looking at this weather impact alert, the time we've identified between 2 and say 6:30 or 7. We're looking at the potential for gusty, damaging winds, possible tornadoes, and a little bit of hail. I don't think the hail threat is as great. That looks like it's going to be confined more across northern and maybe northwest Virginia as opposed to southeast Virginia and North Carolina. But we're still going to be watching in case there is a little bit of hail development. The main thing folks need to do, stay weather aware. And it doesn't matter where you are up or down the East Coast because we've got storms that are going to be impacting a lot of the area. So we always encourage everyone to download the 13 News Now mobile app. We'll show you how to do that later in the show. But you want to stay in touch with a trusted source of weather information. That's what's so important. Now, here's the big picture, and look at this thing. I've got this loop going back over 36 hours, I think 48 hours, but just to show you how it was impacting Texas and Oklahoma. Now it's bringing snow across the Great Lakes region. Those heavy storms rolled through the southeast, and early this morning there were additional warnings out across parts of Georgia and Florida. The line down to the south has weakened a little bit, but things are going to be firing up here in the Mid-Atlantic as we go with the peak heating of the afternoon. So we'll talk more about this whole big picture here, but I want to start off by taking a look at some of the impacts of the high winds across the south. An entire roof ripped off right there. That was off a jail in Mississippi yesterday. This is the Clay County Jail in West Point, Mississippi. And this wasn't from a tornado. These were actually straight line winds from the same severe weather system. There were 7 to 8 inmates inside the unit when the roof came off. Fortunately, no one was hurt, and the inmates were moved to another jail nearby. All right, in Oklahoma, a tornado struck the city of Ada, and yesterday morning, the city says there was 1 injury that was reported. 24 families have been displaced. Look at this video. National Weather Service says this tornado was blowing at 100 to 105 as far as those peak winds, those
incredible winds, 100 to 105 per hour at its peak, and it was on the ground for 3.7 miles, just over 4 minutes. But you can see how much damage it was caused during those 4 minutes. Our ABC station in Oklahoma City reports on the aftermath.
Beyond the caution tape blocking downtown businesses, devastation. Sunken ceiling tiles, broken glass and furniture, insulation covering the floor. And just a few blocks away, an elementary school's roof ripped off. Those at East Central University say it happened within minutes.
About 5 a.m., heard sirens, seen the rain.
When the sun came up, they saw the damage.
The rooftops hanging off, there's trash cans flying everywhere.
And they immediately turned to help. Hundreds of college athletes filling the streets, picking up trash and helping those in need.
We just walked around, picked up as much trash as we could, and try to bring smiles to the people in the community.
For some, it was the Oklahoma standard they've grown up with.
Back home, we had a couple bad storms that we all pitched in,
And for others not from Oklahoma.
I'm not used to tornadoes or any super crazy weather like this, so it's different to see it, but it feels good to get out and be able to help and clean up and take care of trash and make the community look a little better.
To be able to uplift them, because, it's not about us, right? This is an opportunity to come together, rebuild, and shape through this devastation.
Love to hear that spirit, and they will rebuild. We're going to talk about what's happening down here again across Texas. You see the line, and this is the loop that goes back a little bit farther. I wanted to show you the storms as they erupted across Oklahoma, and then that line coming through Dallas. A lot of damage there, and I know Taylor Stephenson, again, my colleague, has been looking at some storm reports, and Taylor has more.
I sure do, Craig. We are looking at some of the potential damage from possible tornadoes across parts of Texas. This is from Louisville, Texas, outside the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And you can kind of see a little bit of the damage being some insulation blown through parts of the streets. Some roofs are down. From what this looks like, it does look like tornado damage. But again, the Weather Service has to go back and confirm those tornadoes. Now, the National Weather Service out in Fort Worth, Texas, says that they are conducting surveys today. They did confirm a tornado out in parts of Dallas County, just outside DFW in the city of Irving, where a tornado did touch down. But this is the one that they're probably going to survey over the next few hours in Louisville, Texas. But this from Adam Lucio off of Twitter. He was showing some of those pictures of what was some damage. Now, our sister station in Dallas shared a video on the same social media app on X showing a woman being woken up this morning when winds blew her window open. It was completely closed. This happened around 5:30 a.m. and you can kind of see her trying to fix the window to repair it. Oh, that's just so jarring, especially when you're dead asleep during those points. And a lot of these came from non-thunderstorm wind gusts. And from our storm reports over the past 18 hours, there have been multiple reports across parts of the Great Plains into the Deep South from Monday into Tuesday as well. A lot of these are non-thunderstorm wind gusts that also blew a lot of dust from West Texas into the DFW Metroplex, where there's some images on Twitter that are just spectacular of the sunset going down, but it's so orange because of all the reflection coming off of those dust particles. So there is the non-thunderstorm wind gusts in Irving, Texas, but again, the National Weather Service in Fort Worth, Texas, has confirmed a tornado did touch down in that same area, but non-thunderstorm wind gusts up to about 60 miles per hour. That's something that we could see as this system starts to ramp up. Our wind gusts maybe not as strong from non-thunderstorms, up to about 45 miles per hour, but we do have a wind advisory in place for our coastal cities. We also are seeing some reports of some tornado storm reports. This comes out of Shreveport, Louisiana, and it says a brief EF1 tornado did touch down in North Highlands neighborhood of North Shreveport. It began along Booth Drive and then moved east, snapping a bunch of trees and their trunks, and then continued downing some trees and some soft woods. So there are reports of tornadoes. So this system has a history of producing tornadoes. Again, one confirmed back in Irving, Texas, and we are just outside of a tornado watch at this point. Is it possible that a tornado watch could be issued downstream for us later on within the next couple of hours? Absolutely. But we are expecting at least some damaging wind gusts, But Craig, tornadoes are not out of the question.
Yeah, you're right about that, Taylor. And I do believe that we will get that watch posted this afternoon. I think it'll probably come up sometime around 11 or noon, and then it'll run through about 6 o'clock until that line is forecast to be offshore. So the exact timing will determine the length of that tornado watch, but it's very likely they're going to extend it eastward and through the coast for Virginia and down into North Carolina. Now, we mentioned all of the damage down there across parts of the south, but this system also extends to the north. And while it's a different impact, we're seeing some impact up that way in the form of wintry weather. We're getting video of snow and wind up across the northern U.S. This is a look at Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And even though it was a pretty light snowfall by their standards, the high winds are really adding to the impacts. Gusts have been reported between 40 and 50 miles per hour. This is just a powerful area of low pressure, that deep low, cranking up those winds. This morning, winds are going to die down as the storm continues to track to the east, but South Dakota is bracing for more snow chances tomorrow night and into Friday morning. And in Minneapolis, the storm dumped several inches of snow yesterday, and this morning, more. You can see this. It's the largest snowfall of the season at the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport, and it's making any sort of travel difficult this morning through that. The highest snow total report so far had nearly a foot of snow in some areas, and the most hovering between 6 and 8 inches for most locations. As always, try to avoid going out in conditions like this, but if you have to drive very slowly and very carefully. And you can see, again, the dash cam video there with those treacherous conditions. All right, we're going to talk about all this severe weather and talk about the impacts right here across Hampton Roads. And you can see we have this level 3 risk identified by the Storm Prediction Center. So we take a look at this. Yesterday, we had level 3 posted for this afternoon. We've known that there was a good chance we were going to deal with this, so not a surprise at all. But what changed between yesterday and today? The National Weather Service, the Storm Prediction Center, they actually extended this area of level 3 or enhanced risk from yesterday. It was just around York, was kind of the northern extent of it, and areas down to the south were all shaded in orange. The areas to the north, level 2 in yellow. Well, today, this morning when I came in, the Storm Prediction Center had raised that risk threat across Northampton County on the eastern shore, parts of Accomack, the northern neck, all of the Middle Peninsula. So Matthews and Gloucester, you're now included in this elevated risk at level 3. And then out through Richmond, Farmville, this whole area, obviously expecting numerous severe storms. There's going to be a line that comes through, and I wanted to show you how the storm's coming together right now. You see the wind field here, and we've got the wind advisories because we've got high pressure offshore. We've got this strong front and that strong area of low pressure off to the northwest. So just the difference between this low pressure with the front and the high pressure offshore packing up, again, that steep pressure gradient between the low and the high pressure creates those strong south winds. That's why temperatures are going to be back up into the upper 60s today. Now, that front's going to come through, and until this front clears the area, we still have to be on guard for the severe storms, and I do anticipate that. As I mentioned, we've got the watch just out to our west and to our southwest, but there's very, very good chance, expect another watch to be extended to the north and east, covering eastern North Carolina and eventually Hampton Roads as well. We do have numerous warnings out there. We'll zoom in and take a closer look at this. I will say earlier, just off to the southeast of Charlotte, there was a severe, or not just a severe thunderstorm, there was a tornado warning that was issued for a small community just off to the southeast of Charlotte. It was radar indicated. What you're seeing right now is, again, we've got 3 or 4 different thunderstorm warnings, and a couple of these have the potential for, some circulations. You have possible tornado when you get that yellow and red outline around that. They're really concerned that there could be quick developing kind of a spin-up tornado. So we'll zoom in. I've got the live radar sweeps on, and these are just thunderstorm warnings along this line. But this is kind of the nature of what we're looking at. And again, my colleague Taylor Stephenson is kind of standing by. I don't know if her mic is open or not. But Taylor, as you're looking at this, this is kind of a classic setup with this line coming through. Do you have anything you want to add?
What we traditionally call this is a quasi-linear convective system, or simply a QLCS.
QLCS.
Yes, yeah, all those letters. QLCS, but a quasi-linear convective system. And that just means a line of strong to severe thunderstorms. But when you usually have that tornado possible tag, those tornadoes are not going to be your traditional supercell tornadoes like you would see in a textbook. These are going to be the ones that kind of spin up and produce your more weak tornadoes, anywhere from an EF0 to an EF2. Right now, I'm not seeing anything that's really sticking out to me on the radar right now. But I do see a lot of heavy rainfall. I'm sure there's frequent lightning, gusty winds.
And as we watch this line kind of move along, we could see at times some bowing, and that's an indication that you get some heavier downdrafts kind of forcing that precipitation, that heavier precipitation out. It's just indicative of some stronger wind flow kind of mixing down to the ground, and you get some outflow with these storms. So we're going to be watching all of this. Again, I'm not seeing anything too crazy here either, and I am going to revisit that QLCS coming up. That's it. I had to think about the letters
But
again.
don't let this line fool you. A lot of times you'll see this right now and we'll get a different radar scan and you'll see some rotation popping up. Yep. So it's just one of those things where you have to just really keep an eye out for the radar.
And I think it's really significant to note as well, and I know we're doing a lot of voice over the graphics here, but when we're looking at this right now, this is how it looks right now. As we get into the afternoon, right now it's 9 o'clock in the morning. As we get into the afternoon, we reach that peak heating of the day. We're going to see temperatures into the upper 60s, pushing low 70s for some spots. There's going to be a lot more energy and available energy. There's going to be a lot more instability in the atmosphere, so that while the line looks pretty impressive now, I expect it to have even more energy to work with this afternoon. So I think the timing of this front coming through, and Taylor, again, you're just off camera. If you want to jump back
okay,
in,
I'll come on camera.
Taylor. Like, she's staying away. No, but my point is as bad as it looks this morning, and they're dealing with thunderstorm warnings, it could be a lot worse across our area this afternoon.
For sure. That's because we have that daytime heating. So when temperatures soar to the upper 60s, lower 70s, you have more energy to work with. We call that CAPE. A lot of people don't know what CAPE is. Convective Available Potential Energy. And that's just saying that there's a lot of energy from the sun, from solar heating, that helps to get these storms going. So that's why over the past few days, we talked about timing. Timing is so important when it comes to a line like this. If it happens overnight, your chances of seeing those very strong storms get a little bit weaker. Not saying that it's not impossible, because in Oklahoma and Texas, it happened overnight. We still saw tornadoes, but with our setup here today, it's more likely we see those stronger storms because it's tapping into the warmest part of the day.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where the ingredients are lining up with the timing at the front. So we just want to make folks aware of that. Now let's talk about this timing, Taylor, and we have that coming up. So we'll take a look at the general timeline as we go through the afternoon. We're going to, and I'll show you the future cast so you can see it graphically, but basically from 2 to 3 o'clock, that's when storms are likely to arrive right at the I-95 corridor. So the westernmost parts of our area, we're going to be busy looking at storms out kind of rolling over I-95. After that, it shifts farther eastward.
Right, and so we get into the south side peninsulas, northeastern North Carolina, where that's pretty much the heart of Hampton Roads right there at around 3 to 5 p.m. So we've already seen some schools starting to taper back on their early releases and stuff like that. But if you have any outdoor activities during this time, just making sure those are either pulled inside or just postponed to a later date.
Yeah, you definitely need to stay weather aware. And when we talk about our most populated areas, some of you may be watching from outside of our area, maybe go Hampton Roads.
Where's that at? Yeah.
Okay, we have a population of about 2 million people in Southeast Virginia and Northeast North Carolina. Hampton Roads represents the 7 cities. It's kind of like New York's 5 boroughs.
Right.
You know, all of the cities all kind of touch together to make New York City. Well, in Hampton Roads, we have 7 different cities that are all neighboring, touching one another, and that makes up Hampton Roads as a community. So about 2 million people, and the vast majority of those folks impacted between 3 and really about, we'll say 6 o'clock, because it fills in across the south side through 5. It's going to push towards the beaches. We're talking Virginia Beach here, 5:30 or so, maybe 5:30 to 6.
Yeah,
So something like that. And then as we go past 6 and 7, it'll start to clear out. It'll swing off down to the south along the outer bank. So that's the general thinking for the timeline on this. Now, when we talk about the chances for rain, again, you see it kind of jumps up there big time as we go middle afternoon to early, say, early evening. I think 3 to 4, 5 o'clock, good chances for heavy rain. As we go past 6:30 or 7, it drops down. It is interesting that the models started picking up on this chance for some additional kind of pop-up showers behind it. We'll see.
But the good news is with this system is that once that main line moves past you, your severe weather threat will be over. So that's the good news. It's not like we're going to be waiting all night to see if anything else pops up. These little small blips could just be some isolated showers coming behind the system.
Yeah, a little bit of instability, but generally when you get all that rain coming down, it cools the atmosphere, kind of everything chills out, the front moves through. So we are looking at the greatest threat again in those times we just identified. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about what's going on with our weather impacts, and we're going to talk about the strong front coming through. Again, severe storms possible. When we break down these different threats, okay, we have gusty, damaging winds possible. We've got a wind advisory, right?
We do, and that wind advisory we could see wind gusts from non-thunderstorms. This is the head of that system. Craig was just saying, we're sandwiched between high pressure out to sea and this low pressure system pumping up winds from the south in our area. That could be up to 45 miles per hour. So pretty gusty.
So you get those ahead of the cells, then the cells come into play with this. We could see some gusts with the strongest cells, the outflow, maybe 55 or even 60 miles per hour. So something to consider with the severe storms coming through. But even without that line on top of us, those higher gusts Taylor just mentioned. Now we're going to come back and revisit this QLCS tornadoes possible. Okay, basically QLCS is kind of a scientific reference
it's a big word.
to a squall line, these squally tornadoes. And I do want to walk over to the big board and talk a little bit more about this. So we're going to jump in. Now, as Taylor mentioned, she really started to hit on some of these points earlier. They are generally a little bit on the weaker side. They tend to be EF2 or lower. So it could be EF0, EF1, EF2, but they tend to be on the weaker side. They're not the supercell tornadoes or the long track tornadoes that form and they're down on the ground and go for miles and miles and stay down for, long periods of time. These tend to be more kind of spin up, touch and go. They can do damage. You get an EF1 or an EF2 tornado and it can tear apart, a building or certainly tear a roof or damage siding and windows and all kinds of stuff. So we need to take them seriously. But again, it's not the massively destructive, monsters that we see with the supercells. They do tend to occur more typically during the cool season, and early March certainly qualifies as that. A lot of times they also occur in the evening or early in the morning after you lose some of the peak heating of the day. But in this case, we've got the squall line coming through during the afternoon, and we need to watch for it. So it is associated with the squall lines, and they are typically short-lived. That was another thing. But this is something that we need to work hard at. And as a meteorologist and as a staff of meteorologists, that's where we're going to be poring over the radar images. We've got all kinds of great algorithms set up on the radar to identify early signs of rotation. And then we're constantly diving in. We're investigating the winds, inflow, outflow, storm relative motion. We take a look at the velocities. We obviously look for other things when there are tornadoes or circulations identified. We start to look for debris balls. We look for different things indicating that there's an actual tornado out there or one is forming. So that's why it is so important, again, with these little QLCS tornadoes to tune into a trusted source. If you are in Hampton Roads, you're watching right now. I'm glad you found us here at 13 News Now. But if you are outside of our immediate viewing area, maybe you're off to the north or down a little farther south into North Carolina, and you're checking out this video right now, make sure you tune to a trusted source, somebody that in your area that will be watching for those types of things. You don't get a lot of warning with them. Sometimes they'll spin up, do their thing, and go away quickly. And, you know, we also tend to see some similar type of tornadoes developing sometimes when there's tropical storm systems making landfalls. You'll get a squall line moving along and you get these little spin-up tornadoes. You have to be super vigilant in watching and then issuing those warnings as they spin up. So that's what we wanted to say about that. Now, the severe threats, primary is going to be the gusty winds. The hail threat's pretty low for Hampton Roads in northeast North Carolina. You get up into northern Virginia, areas north and west of our area, and there it's a little bit greater. But at this point, hail appears to be one of the lower threats when you identify these. There is that threat of the weaker tornadoes to spin up and street flooding. We're talking about rainfall that could develop maybe an inch to an inch and a half in a fairly short amount of time. That could create some street flooding. Taylor mentioned the wind alerts that we have, a wind advisory for coastal communities here in the mid-Atlantic, and those winds could gust in excess of 40, 45 miles per hour in a few locations. That's before the storms. Once the storms come in, we'll see even higher gusts, but these are just general winds as the model's projecting. You can see through 5 o'clock, Chincoteague with a gust up to 50, Edenton, maybe with some storms coming into play there, getting higher, 57 to 60 miles per hour potentially. Once the front clears, still breezy, but the winds do ease considerably. Now, here's a look at the timing on this, and you can see this is exactly what we were talking about. Around noon, some of that light precip starts knocking at the door out to the west, but we're still dry. Notice the wind projection. These are gusts at Norfolk International. It's possible, it's not a guarantee, but this model is projecting, I believe this is the graph model, projecting a 40-mile-per-hour wind gust potentially around Norfolk. So those winds cranking up ahead of that line of strong to severe storms. As we go to 2 o'clock, now we're starting to see rain filling in along I-95 here. And as we go past that towards 3:30, it's now pushing closer to Newport News, Williamsburg, some of our communities, some of our more densely populated areas off to the north and west starting to be impacted. This is a brand new updated futurecast based on the graph model, and I will say previous model had it coming in a little bit earlier, so it's actually slowed the advance at least through 3:30, 4 o'clock. It's still bringing it in. It's not a major adjustment, but it does look like it's maybe slowed just a little bit, a half an hour or so from where it was looking a little bit earlier. As we get into the 4:30 to 5 o'clock time period, now it's ripping across the eastern or across the peninsula, middle peninsula, and the northern neck. Heavier rain filling in Norfolk, Chesapeake, Portsmouth, Suffolk, back down through Franklin and Ahoskie. Storms starting to erupt down around Edenton and some of the areas down to the south. As we go past 4:30 to 5, now the storms really firing up right around Hampton Roads. I'm thinking about the bridge tunnels, the Monitor Merrimack, the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. This is the heart of the evening commute. So we're getting into folks that were hoping to hit the roads and get on home for dinner and to rejoin family and friends. You can see storms will impact the evening commute. As we head through the 5:45 to 6 o'clock time period, here's where those storms are now really bearing down and reaching the coast. Eastern shore, that heavy rain filling in, some more showers and storms kind of still hanging back across parts of the eastern peninsula. Areas off to the west, though, along I-95, you're in the clear by 6 o'clock. Newport News coming out of it. You might still see some storms on the east end, but as you're back towards, say, Fort Eustis and City Center, you're kind of on the backside around 6 p.m. Notice the winds, though, still howling, and this stuff here reaching the most densely populated part of the area, pushing off Virginia Beach there by 6:30, quarter to 7. As we look down to the south, the rain still impacting Dare County, the Outer Banks of North Carolina, down around Kill Devil Hills, Manteo, some of those areas, Nags Head and Kitty Hawk. They'll be under it through about 6:30, quarter to 7. After that, things do improve. And again, the model's kind of hinting at a few stray showers, but nothing severe after that. Things will improve as we go forward. Rainfall totals here. Take a look at this map, and I'll step out so you can get a good look at it. The numbers have backed down just a little bit around Norfolk. You can see about 0.4 of an inch in Chesapeake. Some other areas, though, like Emporia, 1.73, Franklin and Wakefield over 1.5 inches, Elizabeth City around 1.5 inches, and at Kill Devil Hills, some pretty heavy rain down that way. I would not hang my hat on Chesapeake or Virginia Beach or Norfolk, any of those areas having lighter amounts of rain. I would say heavy amounts of rain potentially anywhere. It just depends on how things set up. Now, as we take a look at this is the flood outlook and basically our risk for flash flooding. It does extend down through southeastern Virginia. So this is one of those things that's identified by a division of the National Weather Service and NOAA, one of the products that they issue. And while we're talking about all this severe weather and the watches, warnings, this very flood outlook that you're looking at here, it kind of brings to mind some of the recent cuts that you may have heard about, some of the staffing cuts at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, also known as NOAA. Some have asked, some have wondered what these cuts mean for severe weather watches and forecasts. ABC's chief meteorologist and chief climate correspondent Ginger Z explains.
So many changes at government agencies. I've been getting messages like this. Are we in more danger since NOAA might get shut down? Well, nobody's saying NOAA is shutting down, but with last week's cuts, there are real concerns that your forecast is going to be impacted. I've always said that I love meteorology and the weather because I love to put together the pieces of the puzzle that is the atmosphere. I wanted to make this really simple, so I made a puzzle and wrote the atmosphere on it. Each puzzle piece you could think of as a thermometer or say a satellite, a radar. And each of these puzzle pieces is critical to making a good forecast. The National Weather Service, which is part of NOAA, owns, operates, and maintains these puzzle pieces. So when you get rid of them, you have a less accurate forecast. While we don't know exactly what jobs have been cut, we did immediately see impacts like this. A weather balloon in Alaska, because of staffing shortages, will no longer be launched. So that means you've taken out some of the puzzle pieces. That means a forecast will be less accurate, even though it was in Alaska, because that puzzle piece impacts the whole rest of the atmosphere. The National Weather Service has 122 offices across the nation, 13 river forecast centers, and 2 tsunami warning centers. Before last week, they had about 4,200 employees, but with the deferred resignation and the firings, they're about 280 short from that. And you say, well, there had to be some fat to be trimmed. Not only can I not do my work without the National Weather Service, but the entire world of forecasting hinges on the NWS. That's right. Everything in weather, including the app that tells you what the temperature is walking out the door. That's run by observations from the National Weather Service. And that forecast that you look at to plan your day, yeah, that one too, it's run by NOAA computer models. That tornado warning that got you and your family in your basement and safe with your helmets on, yeah, that was issued by the National Weather Service, by a forecaster who was reading their radars, which they have 159 of, that they also maintain. And I know that most people have no idea how lucky we are. We have the most extensive network of observations here in the United States. It's all from the National Weather Service, which prior to 1970 was called the Weather Bureau, and that started in the late 1800s. Just like I take my observations of temperature, wind speed data right here in my backyard, the National Weather Service takes them every hour of every day at every major airport around the country. Then, at least 90 weather balloons are launched by the National Weather Service every day. They go up much like the drone is rising into the atmosphere, and there's a little box attached. They capture temperature, dew point, pressure, lots of different variables, and then they send that data back. That cross-section of the atmosphere is critical to put into computer modeling and make our forecast. Not only is it the hardware and the forecast, but it is the way that that information gets shared. And each National Weather Service office has partners with local fire departments, police, schools, emergency managers, all the way up to the federal level so people can prepare for disaster. And when a disaster's coming, like flooding in a flood-prone area like this, they, the National Weather Service, will talk to city planners so they can get ready for the emergency. Your power company that energizes your power lines and give you power in your home, yet they're likely using data collected and maintained by the National Weather Service to make decisions about disasters. To give you an idea of what the typical National Weather Service office looks like, and they are all different depending on size, but in general, you'll have an MIC, a meteorologist in charge. They're kind of the overall manager. The SOO, the Science Operations Officer, they do a lot of the training. The WCM, which is the Warning Coordination Meteorologist. Then you have a hydrologist, often that is shared between 2 offices. The IT support, to make sure computers work and all, engineers for the radar and more, then 4 to 6 lead forecasters, and 4 to 8 support forecasters, because they all work in shifts. Now, all of these people cover all of this: the storm spotter network, the marine weather, the aviation weather, tsunami, and even fire weather. Pretty important. And get this, the American Meteorological Society put out a study that showed that the National Weather Service costs the taxpayer about $4 per year. I'd say that's a pretty amazing return on investment for a life-saving service. The union that represents the National Weather Service employees is worried that at each National Weather Service office, they may not have enough staffing to run 24/7 like they do now. They also, and you've got to hear the exact words here, they're concerned that there may not be sufficient satellite operations to track and command the weather satellites on a continuing basis. If we lose that data, that is a giant, gaping hole in our puzzle.
Some really important stuff to think about there. And again, we have just an outstanding relationship with our National Weather Service office out of Wakefield. And I have, in every market I've worked with, always really gotten to know the men and women that work at those Weather Service offices and the work they do. It's a team effort to be able to bring you the information you need to protect you and your family and your property. So again, some important stuff to think about there from Ginger Z. All right, here are the weather headlines for today. Windy and warm. We mentioned that. Storms coming this afternoon. All threats on the table with this line. So we do expect it to be very impactful later today and into the late afternoon. By just after supper time, most of that stuff should be moving out. 68 the high yesterday. We're going to be back up there again today. We're normally at 57. We're going to add to our precipitation surplus for the year when we get the heavier rain coming through this afternoon. Right now, as we take a look at the satellite and radar images, it looks like some stuff's trying to fall. There might be a few sprinkles out there, but the storminess is farther to the west. And you'll notice again, we have this watch that is out west of our area. We will see a new one being posted later today for our area through the afternoon until the threat is gone. Gale warnings also going up for the bay and the ocean. The winds really kicking up and the seas building as well. So a lot to consider there. Obviously, you want to stay in port. Trees, we have juniper, maple, and ash, along with cedar, starting to produce some more tree pollen. It's moderate, grass is low, and mold is low right now. That's our allergy report. Temperatures today, upper 60s, maybe a little cooler in Virginia Beach, but generally in the upper 60s. We'll look for those storms and the rain to develop this afternoon, as we mentioned. Same deal up on the peninsula, mid-60s there, a little cooler at Matthews, and upper 50s to near 60 on the eastern shore. North Carolina, upper 60s inland, mid-60s at the Outer Banks. Overnight tonight, 46. Again, the lingering showers will end. We're going to see skies becoming partly cloudy. Tomorrow, back to 57, partly to mostly sunny. And as we go forward through the weekend, let me remind you, daylight saving time begins, so we lose an hour of sleep. I wonder who's going to be working Sunday morning on short sleep with daylight.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Ooh. Well, I will say I will give that hour of sleep to have sunsets much later.
You and me both. Yeah, I really do enjoy the longer sunset times. You know, once we go a little bit later into the evening. That's nice. All right, the 13 News Now app, that is your best way to stay in touch with all of our weather alerts and weather coverages through the afternoon. And again, with the threat of severe weather, you want to make sure your phones are charged, your iPads, your other tablets and mobile devices, whatever you're using to stay informed. You want to have that stuff ready to go in case there are some power outages. And even before the storms arrive, you know, we could have some issues with just the wind advisory not blowing around some power lines and whatever. Sometimes we do lose power. So take time to make sure your stuff is all charged up and ready to go. And then use that 13 News Now weather app, or the mobile app, to be up on news and weather. I
agree. And again, Craig made a very good point earlier. Make sure you're listening to trusted sources when it comes to weather like this. Craig and I we got our degrees out there in the heartland of the country, Mizzou and Oklahoma. So
two rival schools there, but
great programs.
Oklahoma's program is phenomenal, and the people, Mizzou's program is a little bit smaller, but the professors were incredible. We had fellows of the AMS and just, some of the great minds. So we have both an extensive background, but make sure you know who you're turning to.
Yes.
If you're outside of Hampton Roads, you've got somebody you trust. That's good. That's going to be the important thing. You have to stay weather away.
I agree.
All right, and another way you can do that, you can find us on social media. Again, I'll be doing some videos and posting some different things. We have warnings also issued on our social media platforms. So check out any of those to find me. Again, our entire weather team will be working hard for you through the afternoon. This has been a little bit longer edition of the Weather Desk. We normally keep them about a half an hour, but there's just a lot to go over
There
today.
is, and we're going to be more active on social media and streaming today. So definitely keep up with us as we stream later on this morning. We have our noon show, and then we have Hunter, Tim, and we also have Evan, all meteorologists agreed
and ready to go.
Yeah, for the afternoon.
We will keep you updated, guys. Again, stay right here. I think our next live stream on the 13 News Now Plus app. Okay, if you're watching us on the Plus app right now, come back at 11 o'clock. We'll have another special weather thing. We'll update you on where the storms are and as they're making the approach. Taylor has you covered on 13 News Now today at noon. And I plan to be covering some of the storms coming through from out in the field later this afternoon. So be sure to stay tuned throughout the day. Guys, thanks for joining us for this edition of the Weather Desk. Have a good one and stay safe.